speak on an agenda item, please complete a speaker's card and give it to the city clerk before the meeting, or at the latest prior to the time for public comments on that item. When joining via Zoom, please use the raise your hand feature or press *9 on your phone to request to speak. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes.
Do we have any speaker cards, Madam Clerk?
I have no speaker cards and there are no hands raised on Zoom.
Okay, and we'll turn immediately then to new business, please. Item number 1, Madam Clerk.
Discussion and direction regarding the city's broadband strategy. And our presenter is Public Works Senior Management Analyst Marisa Cumbian.
We do have Chuck on the line. It was Dan and Error both on their end, so Chuck is here. So.
Okay.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. This is Savita Chaudhary. I'm the Director of IT. With me joining is Marisa Kumpian from Public Works, Senior Management Analyst. And today we are here to provide an update on broadband and the efforts we have done researching the options for us. We are going to go into a little bit of background. Oops, sorry. All right. Just decided to move on me, sorry. So today we're going to give you a little bit of background on the development and the research we have done around the broadband options, some of the recommendations from our consultant, and future next steps. So what is broadband? So we hear all these terms all the time: wireless, wired, broadband, latency. Broadband is basically fiberglass in the ground, in the conduit. There is a general misconception that we can have all this wireless infrastructure, we will have public Wi-Fi everywhere, but that is also needing broadband or fiber in the ground as a basis before we can implement Wi-Fi. So this slide basically just differentiates between the difference between wireless and wired infrastructure. What has happened on the regulation side? So in 1996, the Telecommunications Act came out and they made the telecommunications options more open for competition. Then in 2020 with the COVID, a lot of changes happened in the technology world, and Governor Newsom, he came with an executive order of N7320, which talks about providing broadband options to the unserved or underserved community, providing middle mile, and you will hear all these terms like middle mile, last mile. They all vary minutely. So for example, if we were to put a fiber in the ground, that is the core infrastructure. If we connect it with the highways, then it becomes middle mile. And let's say we put fiber across downtown. Now, when we connect businesses, the fiber that goes from the ground to the business is called lateral. So these are some of the things that you hear in the industry quite often. And then most recently, there was a Digital Equity Act that came, which is known as Infrastructure and Investment Jobs Act. There is about $6.7 million available on various grant funding, and we will be talking about some of those options. The timeline around the project. So the project initiated back in September 2019. The council authorized a broadband development plan. Since then, the initial report was finalized and council approved 4 different policies. They were around telecommunications, the small cell infrastructure, DIG Once policy, and how we can implement some of this telecom infrastructure in our city. In May of 2021, council further authorized to do more further research on how we can implement some of this infrastructure in our city, and that was the intent of the broadband action plan. And we will be going over some of those details, and with this slide, I will hand off to Marisa, who's going to talk about infrastructure options on the broadband action plan. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. It's a lot of information to cover. Hopefully, we're concise and as brief as possible. In September 2019, City Council authorized Magellan Advisors to provide consulting services associated with preparing a master licensing agreement and 5G master plan consulting. At the time, the focus was establishing controlled standards for city poles in order to preserve the city's right to public infrastructure right-of-way and allow for the interconnection of city facilities in the future. Outcomes and deliverables of what would officially be identified as the broadband development plan included supporting staff to prepare an ordinance establishing regulations governing wireless telecommunications facilities within the city, an ordinance to establish a dig once policy, and a resolution proposing adoption of small cell design deployment standards. City Council approved all of these initiatives in 2021 calendar year. Additional analysis included a conceptual fiber backbone. The network infrastructure and vision was based on proximity to key economic and municipal assets and would involve nearly 60 miles of high-capacity fiber optic cable. Backbone design assumptions included 144 strand fiber on all segments, 60% aerial deployment, 40% underground deployment contained in 2 4-inch conduits. All-in costs, including materials and appropriate prevailing wages, were estimated at $6.8 million. As previously mentioned, a general business model comparison was prepared. It ranged from passive to active models. On this table, light orange indicates passive models and dark orange active models. The red square indicates consultants' analysis of the most viable options. The recommended approach was to explore public-private partnership, where most of the network would be built, funded, and owned by private partners. It also considered that we would not enter or consider entering a model where we would essentially compete with any other providers. Other associated recommendations included designing a department and a dedicated position to coordinate and lead network infrastructure development, establishing and maintaining an inventory of existing assets such as underground and above-ground assets, developing and releasing a request for proposals for assistance developing, evaluating, and finalizing partnerships with internet service providers, entering non-exclusive agreements with partners to expand broadband in the city, and evaluating and pursuing investment opportunities that align with city priorities, prioritizing connections to city facilities, safety cameras and traffic signals, commercial corridors, new developments, and water facilities. As a part of the the broadband development plan provided general guidance and recommendations. However, new city leadership became interested in exploring the feasibility of taking a more active role and establishing a broadband utility with a focus on open access dark fiber wholesale model. To create a transparent process, identify and prioritize opportunities to expand broadband access, and to perform due diligence in estimating required investment, staff commissioned the Broadband Action Plan as an addenda to the Broadband Development Plan. The Broadband Action Plan deliverables include a gap analysis to determine areas of the city that are unserved or underserved, conceptual network design adjustments to meet the needs of a more diverse range of stakeholders, cost-saving and revenue-generating opportunities, and financial analysis of business scenarios to ensure the city has a full understanding of the business and financial suitability of the various options. The National Telecommunications and Information Administration and California Public Utilities Commission broadband maps document reported served and underserved segments. On the screen, you can see for the same snapshot of Fairfield, there are only a few pockets of unserved on the CPUC map that don't correspond to the NTIA map. These maps are considered inaccurate. However, efforts at a national and state level are underway to update. Here we see a Solano County Community Report regarding broadband access. Stats are from the 2015 through 19 American Community Survey and 2017-21 UCLA. I'd like to call to your attention that 91% of households report having some type of broadband. Speed test results vary significantly based on testing portal, and only 4.4% of the population within the survey reports speeds below 25 megabytes per second, 3 megabytes per second, download, upload. The consultant prepared a survey for City of Fairfield residents and businesses. The survey was available August through November 2021. Staff mailed a postcard to all 4,000 plus active business licenses, utilized broadband community partner distribution group contact emails. Examples included the Workforce Development Board and the 4 chambers, marketed on social media and Channel 26. Response rate was lower than expected, and the survey yielded 247 usable responses. To provide context, speeds under 25 megabytes per second download and 3 megabytes per second upload were considered slow speed connections as designated by federal agencies such as the Federal Communications Division. This benchmark is used as a baseline for broadband funding programs. Survey findings indicated most respondents thought they had good service. Most responses were also positive regarding speed and reliability. Price was the only factor with which respondents were generally dissatisfied, with over half indicating it was bad or terrible, and nearly 30% saying it was either good or excellent. A series of focus groups with various sectors of the community were held. Findings yielded the following information. At Solano Town Center, connectivity was identified as a significant issue. In other areas with more limited options, owners of an auto dealership near Auto Mall Parkway reported paying $600 per month for 500 megabits. Businesses and interstate locations along the freeway and the Cordelia area seem to have the highest cost and limited options. The Fairfield Sassoon Unified School District indicated they handed out over 750 hotspots costing $40 per month before a state subsidy. This slide essentially gives us a moment to look at what affects quality of broadband. So impacts can range from anything from the numbers of devices and applications running at the same time, age of devices and software, location of modem and age and distance to the device, network, your plan, and the location and quality of the various internet service provider infrastructure. So for our broadband action plan, there was a gap analysis and findings which concluded that services are adequate but expensive. Primarily, there's just 2 service providers and there's a gap in competition and control. Providers have no incentive to improve costs, coverage, or speed. Availability gaps. It's not uncommon for locations a block apart or on opposite sides of the street to have different broadband options for many reasons, ranging from cost of construction to service territory boundaries. In other locations like Auto Drive Parkway, business owners have been told that their existing conduit connections from the building to the street are owned by an incumbent provider and cannot be used by others, resulting in the need for construction by another provider who could serve them. Mapping gaps, which again, the federal broadband mapping data can be misleading, and digital equity and inclusion. And that was not a component of the broadband action plan, but I'll turn it over to Savita to talk more about that. Thank you, Savita.
Thank you. As Marisa mentioned, digital inclusion and equity was not part of our consultants' broadband action planning research and efforts, so that is something that staff took on their own. So when we reached out to our neighboring cities in the Bay Area, across the country, we found what are the key barriers to the inclusion. Most common factors are either access to the devices, connectivity, or pricing and affordability. What impacts that inclusion could be because technology is changing so fast, or the education, the digital literacy levels. So there are many factors that play into that inclusion. So what did we do? So we reached out, as I mentioned, to various cities and counties. The Sacramento Coalition for Digital Inclusion, that is a coalition that has about 80 different cities that are part of it, and they have done some extensive work around this. So we started looking at some of those role models and see how and what we can do to provide some of those opportunities to our community. So then we started reaching out to the organizations within our city boundaries. So we reached out to the 4 Chamber of Commerce and different Solano counties. We initiated a discussion with Solano County's digital equity study based on our forefront efforts around the digital equity piece. Now Solano County is forming they're calling it Digital Inclusion and Equity Coalition. They will be having first meeting on 5th of July, which we plan to attend, and then we will identify the collaboration opportunities with various cities among Solano County. City of Vacaville, City of Fairfield, Benicia, Solano County, we're all part of that group. One of the other recommendations was the awareness campaign that we'll be talking about in the next slide. So this particular slide talks about a playbook. So what is a playbook? Playbook is basically a compilation of various ideas how we can provide some of this inclusion and equity efforts to our community members. And this is something for which the full credit goes to Marisa. She did extensive research on this. We reached out to City and County of San Francisco. We modeled our playbook around their model, how they have been successful in creating these opportunities for our community. So first thing we did there was we started a monthly meeting with Solano County Chief Information Officers. Then after that, we started engaging a consultant to do a little bit of deep dive on technical side of things. One of the things that Solano County is doing is, as part of their coalition report, after these consecutive meetings in July, they would be going to their board in August with a plan. And that would include some of these opportunities that we will mention in the next steps, where we will be able to provide some of these benefits to our community members. Before I go on, one last thing I do want to mention is we're also considering some community fairs with our vendors like AT&T and Comcast. They have various opportunities on providing low-cost internet options. For example, Comcast also provides like a Dell laptop for $150 to the community members, and they will provide a year worth of customer support along with that. So those are some of the things we will be collaborating with the library, and library has started giving away some Chromebooks, which you can check out. It's like a kit that you can take home for 3 weeks, and so those are all the opportunities we're looking at on how we can collaborate. Now with this, I'll give it back to Marissa to talk about some of the business models on the infrastructure side.
Thank you, Savita. And one comment that I'll mention is we heard feedback in terms of the current Chromebook program that the library has. I believe they have 50 devices, and currently there's a waiting list of 300 for those devices. And those devices are allowed to be checked out for 3-week periods. So it just really shows the importance of getting people connected to that hardware technology. So at a recent council meeting, we heard that council would like numbers, and we recognize that it's really important to provide numbers for you to make informed decisions. So I will go ahead and go through 5 different business models that were considered here during the broadband action planning process. So we can go everything from the lowest, ooh, hello. Technology. So we can go from everything from the lowest level of risk, really passive model, which essentially would be to maintain the status quo. What does that look like? Where essentially we would be unlikely to address existing and future needs. It would be likely that little investment would be made. We would essentially just be kind of following the process or progress of those established internet service providers. They're market takers, not market makers. So if they don't see or have the desire to develop and provide infrastructure in the community, then it wouldn't happen. The next option we could consider would be to work with current providers, where essentially we could work to develop strong relationships with incumbent providers to demonstrate a willingness to work with them on meeting their goals. The business case will determine willingness to invest. However, areas that will not bring sufficient revenues to their bottom line would most likely remain underserved. The next program approach that we could consider would be to establish programmatic opportunities with them. So we could look at collaborating in digital inclusion and equity measures. There's opportunities for potential joint builds. We could consider creating incentives for expanding and improving services, support grant applications, and asset contribution. The next model could be public-private partnerships. And for that particular business model option, there are so many different varieties that essentially nothing is spelled out in concrete, because it would really be an exploration. And then the final option, which really is the most impact to the city, would be to create a city-owned internet service provider. Okay, so here are some of the really specific numbers. Should we decide to take the path of becoming an internet service provider, looking at today's dollars with the analysis that was performed, these are preliminary numbers. However, there are a number of factors that impact these numbers. Customer willingness to pay for specific services, as well as equipment, labor, and materials. We've been notified by our consultant that we will be looking at a total 5-year investment of $75.5 million. So I'll just take a moment to let that sit. Of that, we have 5 different options that we could consider. Options 1 through 4 consider some element of lit services. And essentially what lit services means is that we would be the next AT&T, we would be the next Comcast. We would have everything from customer service, customer service banks should your internet service go down. We would have field technicians. We would have the actual staff that would be building the infrastructure. It would be a very significant investment to become a lit service. The model that we were exploring primarily was number 5, which would be to look at a dark fiber lease option, wholesale model. And under that particular model, we're looking at a 20-year financial performance estimate of, at the 20-year mark, we would be negative $45 million. So with that in mind, we want to be very intentional about the decisions that we're making. We still have the opportunity to explore some of these various business models. We recognize that these are assumptions. This next slide indicates what we would be looking at in terms of a 20-year estimate and the actual performance. So as suggested in the Model 5, the purple line, if you look at that, it would be around year 1920 that again, we're negative $45 million. Going back to this slide, which indicates the various scenarios, option 2 looks like it could be the most promising should we decide that we wanted to explore becoming an internet service provider. However, we're not at the decision point yet. These are numbers that we wanted to share with council to assist you in exploring and providing guidance to staff so we can make informed decisions. I'll turn it over to Savita so she can bring us back up. It's not all gloom and doom.
Right, so I know that price tag of 75.5 million is a little bit of sticker shock, but future opportunities, it's not all that bad. If we do not spend that extensive budget upfront and we plan it over a number of years, let's say 15 to 20 year cycle, there are many more opportunities that could take advantage of the broadband infrastructure. We could be enabling ourselves as a future smart city. We can take care of AI, artificial intelligence for our traffic signals. We can do much more on climate change monitoring and other future opportunities. There's too many to list right now, but it's just, I wanted to point that out because that $75.5 million number looks like, whoa, it's so big and so negative, but there are positive things to that investment as well. So what are we recommending? At this point, we are not feeling 100% that we are ready to invest in that kind of infrastructure investment. So we want to explore options for a pilot project. We want to explore maybe a stretch of downtown and see how many users or businesses actually take on and become our customers. What is the take rate? What is the usage of that maybe possible public Wi-Fi in future? So if we do a couple of pilots, that will give us sort of an analysis of where we want to be in the future. We want to start working with Solano County and neighboring cities to look at low-cost options of digital inclusion and equity through providing other ways like hotspots or Chromebooks to our community and the students. We want to start looking at public-private partnerships where we do not have to do such a large amount of investment upfront, and then we have some revenue generation models, but we did not have time to consider those. Maintain up-to-date policies. What does that mean? So we spend extensive time in developing these great dig ones and telecommunications policies, but federal and state regulations are changing on us every moment. So we had a dig ones policy. We decided City of Fairfield will not go with micro-trenching, for example. 2 months later, a regulation comes. If a vendor approaches us and they want to do micro-trenching, we legally cannot say no anymore. So that means we need to go back and evaluate our policy to see what impact it would have on our public works infrastructure and the projects that they're working on. We want to start tracking this 6.5 million infrastructure bill that's out. Can we take opportunities from that? Look for grant opportunities. The build a city backbone. So we can build all the infrastructure out in the community, but it needs a home. It needs a place to come and terminate. And that is going to be one of our city facilities, and we do not have that right now. Our own city's infrastructure is on lease by AT&T. So we're spending about $250,000 every year in getting AT&T fiber lines for 14 of our sites. So if we were to invest a portion of this funding into our own infrastructure, there might be long-term savings for the city. And then based on all of this research, maybe a year or 2 years later, we can come back and say, we have done this research, here's our proposal, and we can then decide on a business model. So what are we looking from the council today? We're looking for a direction. This is our proposal to have a funding request for $1 million. And where would that $1 million go? So on the infrastructure side, before we can get into any public or private investments or partnerships or anything, we need to know what is available in the ground. If we ask AT&T to come and collaborate with us, or Comcast, the first question they will ask is, where is your conduit, where is your fiber? We need to do a under-the-ground asset inventory. Our microwave infrastructure that supports over 370 cameras is also aging and is due for replacement. Can we take advantage of this infrastructure funding and maybe start looking at options where we can replace it with fiber for long term? But to do that, we need to do above the ground inventory. We don't have all those inventories available. But this inventory data is not just for broadband. It can be used for many other future uses for the city, for community development, for future development projects, for public works, for various CIP and paving projects. To do all of this work, we do need a technical consultant, which we have on retainer right now, and that would cost us about $100,000 a year. And once we have completed the asset inventory, we will work with our consultant and hire our firm who can then market our assets to invite public and private partnership options. And that's when we can find out more details on what opportunities we have available from various providers. On the inclusion and equity side, we're looking at possibly setting aside $100,000 so we can coordinate with Solano County, AT&T, and Comcast, and maybe give away these laptops to the community students. We can give them to seniors. We can give them to underserved community, or who cannot afford some of that equipment. Again, those, for example, I gave the example of Comcast. For $150, you get a laptop and you get 1 year of service. So for $100,000, we can get a lot of laptops and hotspots. Again, we'll continue our collaboration with the county and nonprofits. We will look for opportunities with nonprofits to provide digital literacy. Look at any other opportunities that are out that other cities are working on, that we can get ideas and work on those. So it's a small amount of $100,000 that we're looking at setting aside for that. So that sort of comes out to be about $1 million, and we're now open for any questions and comments.
Comments, questions, colleagues? Mr. Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I have a question about, you said the different chambers, or what's the date of that meeting?
So those weren't necessarily meetings that we attended. They were touch points in terms of being able to share out the survey, and
Right.
yeah.
No, I thought she had said that there was going to be another meeting in July.
Oh, that is with the Solano County.
Okay,
They are creating a coalition of all the cities in Solano County.
right.
And they have hired a consultant, Boston Consulting Group, who is evaluating what opportunities and funding is available with all the cities, so we can have a collaborative effort around digital inclusion.
Okay, I probably have some more, but that's,
If I can just add to that, the dates on those meetings, 2 dates, the 5th and the 6th, and they expect to bring their findings back to the Board of Supervisors in August.
Any other, Councilman Tonneson, please?
So you talked about a special study, maybe run something downtown. But we already have service downtown. Why would we run it in a place that we have service already? Why would we test that somewhere else?
We haven't decided on the pilot project yet. That was just an option for Heart of Fairfield area, because Public Works already has a project going on from Fairfield Transportation Center to on the West Texas Street. So that was our opportunity, because they're already laying conduit, and if we could lay fiber.
Okay. And then, are we voting on this tonight, David? Are we voting on the options tonight?
This is mostly information. If there was direction that council wanted to provide for us, would certainly take that direction. I think if there was any specific allocations of funds, so for example, staff identified, a variety of areas here that totals about $1 million of options we could proceed with. In any one of those, if those dollar amounts would exceed my expenditure authority, so we would have to come back with some formal resolution in order for council to appropriate those funds.
Mr. Vice Mayor?
Yeah, so we, the $10 million that, okay, now general fund, okay, that we allocated from ARPA, so that's where that $1 million, okay.
Correct. That's where that would come from.
If we're given any direction for what we were given to read tonight, I'm liking option C. If you're just looking for direction tonight, that would be my input.
Any other comments? Councilman Panduro, please.
Thank you for the presentation. And I just want to thank staff for doing the equity and the inclusion piece, because I think that's so important. And I think it's something that we didn't really think about when we first talked about this. And then now that, specifically now, not post-pandemic, but kind of getting there, just realizing the need that is out there. And it's amazing to hear the need just within the library. And I know that's county, but it's such a big need, and I know the communities that I work in are, not hurting, but it is a big gap. And I think it's great that this regional approach is also being done within this sector. So that's really exciting to hear that that's happening, and we're a part of it, because it's so important for us to be able to connect not only families, but then also to lay the groundwork for future of our city and our community. And the pilot program that was talked about, I don't know, the options. I think that's a great idea to figure out, I think, because it is a big step for us as a city. And I think we do need to see, what is out there, number one, and then the best way to move forward in the most beneficial way. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Vaccaro?
Yeah, and I agree with Councilwoman Pandaro on the inclusion. The one thing about Comcast that I'd be, I know I'm really familiar with their Internet Essentials program. I don't, honestly, my opinion is it doesn't reach far enough. I think it could reach far enough. I think they do say that they provide to everyone, and they really don't provide to everyone. So it would be great if we could somehow, if we ended up working with them on this, that we talk about that, especially in our city and the areas that Councilwoman Pandora is talking about, because I know that there have been some issues there just from working in the schools. So,
is that a matter of economics?
it's a matter of economics. It's a matter of who they're reaching out to and who they're not getting a hold of. Because there are a lot of kids out there that actually need this and they don't have it. So.
Any other comments, colleagues?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, this is Chuck.
Hey, go ahead, please, Councilman Tim.
Yeah, thank you, sir. I don't have the list of options in front of me, but when we talked about the asset inventory, where would that fall in the option chart?
So asset inventory is the core. It is like the basis of identifying what assets do we have, where is our conduit, where we actually have fiber in the ground, where do we have poles in our city, where do we have cameras on those poles, and all of that data would then be used for marketing to our private vendors to come and create a public-private partnership with us. So what happens, for example, we may have certain stretch where we have empty conduit. So one of the vendors might come and say, we want to put conduit here, fiber here, and because we're leasing your conduit, we're going to give you, let's say, $1,000 a month, just hypothetical. Similarly, there might be areas where there's no conduit. And then in that scenarios, the vendors might come to us and say, okay, city, you want us to serve this area in your community, but we want partnership with you. We want you to cover 50% of the cost and we'll pay the remaining 50%. So all of those options we cannot identify at this time unless we do this asset inventory, do the marketing, and then explore what private companies are willing to work with.
So if I understand you correctly, we need to do the asset inventory first
Yes.
before we decide which of the four options we want to do. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. That's where I would lean. I want to know what we have so we can make an informed decision, because it sounds like we probably wouldn't pick an option at least until we know what we own, what we have, correct?
Yes, agreed.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other comments, colleagues? Councilwoman Bertondi, please.
Thank you for a great report, much appreciated. I think I understood what you said. It's deep, it's kind of deep. But I do agree with the asset inventory approach. I don't, at this point, what would be concerning to me would be for the city of Fairfield to become an internet service provider, because that's not what cities do, right? I mean, Comcast and those guys, those are the people who do that. And they've pretty much figured out how to do it. Now, partnerships with them, great, yes. And we use our assets in that regard. But to see the city of Fairfield go into the business of being an internet service provider, I think is a real tremendous mistake. And yeah, so I wouldn't recommend that at all. And then the lit services, tell me more about what are lit services?
So lit services is like you have, dark fiber is like you have power to your home, but PG&E has not activated your account. Lit services is like PG&E has now activated your account. So basically.
So when the city provides lit services, we're like PG&E lighting up the account.
Yes.
Yeah, we don't want to go there either. I don't think. Because, I mean, that's a tremendous learning curve, and kind of know-how, issues that other people have already figured that out in that space. And that's why we pay for certain things as opposed to trying to create it ourselves. So that would just be, if that makes sense, my recommendation. I love the idea of partnerships and the asset inventory. Do not like the idea of the city of Fairfield becoming the new Comcast. Yeah. So that's all I have. Thank you for a great report.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, colleagues? Councilwoman Panduro, please.
I just had a question. Was there any other cities that gave ARPA money towards broadband?
We're aware of the city of Vallejo investing $2.5 million regionally here in Solano County. However, they already have a utility established. I want to say back in the 90s, received an MTC grant in $90 for $11 million in order to start their service. They've had some recent challenges and they're re-exploring, and they're making an investment of around, I think, $500,000 or so for consultancy and additional infrastructure investments. And they're part of our ongoing committee and monthly meetings.
Yeah, just one correction, small correction. So Vallejo is not a utility. Vallejo, what they did was back in 90s when they put all this conduit in the ground, then they pulled fiber, and then they hired a private company, which is their open access provider. And that company acts as the internet service provider, and then they do the marketing and they do the selling with the businesses. So I think they're in the market for a new open access provider because their current contract is expiring, but their previous company was called INEO, which is a Southern California company, and now they have, the contract is expiring, so they're out in the market. Actually, their RFP was released on Friday for a new open access provider. So they're not a utility, but they did make significant investment in their conduits and fiber. So all of their city sites are on fiber, so they're saving quite a bit on the infrastructure for the city itself.
Can you speak to the benefits that would come from having this regional approach with regards to broadband?
So on the regional approach, first we're looking at digital inclusion and equity piece. We want to start slow. And then City of Vacaville is also going through a broadband action planning development efforts. So a lot of cities are either in initial stages or they're kind of like us at the middle stage. Vallejo is the only one which is a little bit advanced from us. Solano County is just starting out also. So we have now set up a monthly meeting with them, And then we discuss what stage every project is at, who's doing what, and looking for opportunities where we can collaborate. So for example, if we were to look at something at Fairfield Transportation Center, then we would be looking into grants with the state to do the middle mile to connect that site with the freeway across on Cordelia side. So all of these exploration of these options, we haven't completed yet because there's so much and it's coming so fast. When initially ARPA funding came, it was only for the cities, and then suddenly this, $6.7 billion infrastructure came for middle mile. And even state has not figured out how they're gonna give these grants. So that's what we're figuring out with Solano County. Is it better to do individual grant applications or a collaborative combined applications for the county? So all of that is in progress.
Other comments, please? Councilwoman Bertondi, please.
Thank you. Just one last thing. Are we contemplating collaborating with our school district in terms of the provision of technology and service?
Yeah. So they were one of our initial key stakeholder conversations that we had early on. We're aware that they do have a program currently where they do give Chromebooks out to students and have a actual even renewal cycle on that after the infrastructure has aged. We did have that information from them in terms of the hotspots, and we're looking to coordinate with them in order to get a mapping to understand the true need. So we would like to have continued conversations with them, absolutely.
I think it would be great if we can also kind of partner with, the local Rotaries and, contemplate, thinking about for our high school graduates who are heading to college, to help them with some technology to take with them once they leave the school district and no longer have access to that technology or service.
That's great feedback, thank you.
And I have one concern. Will this also include Travis Air Force Base, or will they be on a separate system?
So we have had conversations with Travis Air Force Base. Of course, you can imagine that there are certain considerations in terms of security. So we do have some of the general needs and assessment findings from them. However, we're keeping that confidential and coordinating with them on a separate effort.
Thank you. Any other comments, colleagues? What direction would you like to give staff?
Asset inventory.
So,
Asset inventory.
Is that a funding, is that for,
Yes.
what would that cost?
So this is our ask, $1 million to do the inclusion equity piece, asset inventory, and we do need that technical consultant to help us with some of these projects and efforts.
So the total price tag of that is what?
So right now, we're requesting $1 million. That's an estimate, so we would be going out, reaching out to the vendors, get the actual quotes, and come back to council for approval for each individual item listed there.
And, yeah,
Yes.
so if I could jump in here. So for just the asset inventory, we're estimating $450,000. That's both the above ground and below ground. The total of $1 million is if there was direction on all of the other items as well, which is then to get the consultancy to assist with additional broadband support and technical advice, coordinating with Comcast and AT&T for some of the digital equity components, as well as another $100,000 for partnering with the county in that as well.
Are there any public comments on this item? Cornelius, want to come forward, please?
This is just a kind of overview of things for you. Lit internet or lit fiber means that it has a signal going in it. Dark fiber means the fiber's been put there and there's no signal in it. It's kind of like a water pipe. When you put the water pipe in, it might not have water in it, but later on you add the water. That's the difference in those two terms right there. And as far as, what do you call it, access, how many of you folks know somebody that does not have cable access? Okay, almost everybody in the world today has some sort of cable access. And if you have cable access, you have internet access at your house right now. So personally, I think Ms. Bertini's thing is right. We don't want to get in ourselves in a position of being an ISP, an internet service provider. It's all good. We should all learn from it. And technology does wonders. But the problem with it is that it's outdated the day it comes in the door. You might be thinking about Wang, word processors, word star, word perfect, and you can go on with all the various programs that have come and gone, and you can spend tremendous amount of time learning them. But the one that you need to learn is the one that's in use today. Okay, that's it.
Thank you. Bring it back for any other council discussion, please. Direction?
So,
Scott, go ahead.
I'm fine with what the council wants, but I'm confused because I thought we were working off of the agenda that we received.
Yeah, those are options on business models. At this point in time, we don't have enough information. We, the city, do not have enough data to even further advise you on any of those options that are identified under the infrastructure. So what we would be looking for under the infrastructure strategy in your agenda packet, we identified some of the costs, which are also now just shown on the screen here for ease. Of these, and I would let Savita speak to this, of these, for us to proceed in looking at any of the business models, certainly the asset inventory is required. We really can't go further at this point in talking about, and I heard you say, Mr. Tonneson, C was your preference, public-private partnerships. So, again, using some of these analogies like, Cornelius used of the water pipe. Even if we're to just put the water pipe in and then go find a private partner that is the ISP, that is the one that does put the water through the pipe, right now we don't have enough information. So we would need the asset. I think then what we're also looking for is there interest of the city council for us to pursue some of the other sides of these things like digital equity and inclusion, whereby we would be subsidizing and assisting some of our low-income residents. And then once we have that asset inventory, utilizing some additional technical support and collaborating with the county on overall countywide broadband access as well.
I'm good with all that. This is the first time I've seen this. Did I just miss it somewhere, or are we all seeing it for the first time?
Well, it's the first time you're seeing the presentation. Under your staff report, under the header infrastructure strategy, we lined out, there's 5 bullet points.
Right, I've got
where those items are identified.
So it's on-
Yeah, so apologies if we didn't make that expressly clear.
I'm good with the.
Mr.
Page 3
Mayor?
of the staff report has these numbers.
Mr. Mayor?
Savita, would you repeat that, please?
I was saying page 3 of the staff report has these infrastructure numbers listed.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Tonneson, please. Go ahead. Oh, Chuck. Sorry, Chuck.
Yeah, no, thank you, Mayor. I need to log off. I have another Zoom meeting, but before I go, I'm very comfortable with the 1 million to start, because that gives us obviously our asset inventory, and then it continues and fosters partnerships with what's been discussed tonight, and that's what staff would like to do. And it was a very, very good presentation, well thought out, and I think the planning is there. We just need to fund it so we know where we're going to go, and I'm very comfortable with that.
Thank you.
If there's no other discussion, is that a motion, Councilman Tim?
If I may,
Yes, sir.
Mayor?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
If I may just address Council Member Tonneson's comments. So part of suggesting the business models here in the staff report was to also essentially give you the findings that happened with the conclusion of the report. So often reports are finalized and council doesn't have the full benefit of hearing what was actually determined or suggested from our consultant. So although the business model options are listed, it's more so to give you kind of just that their initial findings and that awareness in case that was a discussion item tonight. And it's something that can still be explored in the future should council determine that's the direction we wanted to go. But essentially, these are our immediate next steps. So you are not incorrect. We did have that listed. I just want to go ahead and confirm
Yeah,
that
I just
for you.
wanted to make sure that I wasn't missing something,
No,
because
no,
I'm
no.
seeing numbers
Not
that
at
I
all,
haven't
yeah.
seen.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Very good presentation.
Have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I have another question.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Vice Mayor, go ahead.
Yeah,
please.
so if we did the asset inventory, like how would that work? Say if we tonight said, okay, we'll do the asset inventory and the inclusion equity part. Okay, I mean, how would that, I know everything else needs to come around too, but if we just gave direction for that, is that?
So we're prepared to bring forward those items in the next couple of months or so. We've already coordinated initial conversations with those providers to
Okay.
give us scopes of work and preliminary estimates. So we would just be finalizing the actual agreement and bringing it back for council authorization for
Okay.
the asset inventory. And then also in terms of the inclusion portion, just getting a sense on what the findings are for the county's equity plan and their essential ask to us.
Okay, so if the direction was, as I said before, to do the asset inventory and the inclusion equity, and then I know, I'm looking at the technical, are we ready for that yet?
So we're not ready for the consultancy for RFI and RFP yet, but we do need the technical advisor and consultant to help us with some of these other initiatives, the 100,000.
And I can provide an example on how something like that supports us. So in the first broadband development plan that we received an indication that we would have a particular number of strands, 146 strands, a particular size of conduit, a methodology in terms of it being aerial deployment as opposed to underground deployment. Our new findings of the most recent report somewhat contradict many of those former recommendations. Now the suggestion is 2 2-inch conduits or 2 2-inch 4-inch conduits, 436 strands of fiber, as close to zero aerial deployment as possible. So it's for those types of reasons that we need that additional support from the technical considerations. Yes.
Any other comments?
So, so we're talking about doing the infrastructure, the broadband, the inclusion, and the collaboration. Is that what we're voting on?
That was Chuck's motion
Yes.
to fund the entire 1 million.
I'll second
Pass
that
on the
motion.
floor.
I'm sorry.
I'll second.
Yeah. Been moved and seconded. All in favor? Roll call, Madam Clerk. Chuck may still be on, so.
Yeah. no.
I'm on. I voted yes.
Okay, Chuck said yes. Councilmember Bertani?
I don't actually, Chuck, I understand what you're, oops, I'm sorry. Here I am. I understand, Chuck, what you're saying, and I know that the money is there. I'm still sitting here as a gatekeeper to this money. I know it's already in the general fund, it's been provided for. Quite frankly, I think that funding the entire 1 million right now is premature. I think that it would be advisable to do the asset inventory obviously first, because that really is going to guide the direction that we go in terms of our partnerships and in terms of our partnerships. And I think that we can advisably do the collaboration with private entities, because that really is not informed by the asset inventory. So I think that the asset inventory and the collaboration with private entities is advisable. I think that the two at the bottom are going to be governed by what we get in our asset inventory. So that's a long way of saying I'm gonna vote no, because I think that approving the entire 1 million right now is premature.
Thank you. Mr. Vice Mayor?
Chuck, are you still on?
I am.
Okay, so if we did the asset inventory and the collaboration and the technical advisor. How would that, I mean, I'm just
Would that
throwing.
be a friendly amendment?
Would that be a
Yes.
friendly amendment? I like that, yeah, friendly amendment.
Yes, because we're not ready for the RFI, RFP at this time. That will
Right.
take some time. And Solano County initiatives, we don't have the data on that yet either.
Okay. Are you okay with that, Chuck?
I am.
Okay, then I will, so I guess we should,
You have a friendly amendment on the floor, which
have a-
which the motion maker just accepted.
I have a friendly
So we're voting on the friendly amendment,
Okay, is there a?
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can the friendly amendment be repeated, please?
What did she say? You gonna make a third one?
No, she wants you to repeat it.
Oh, okay, okay.
Please repeat
So,
your
I'm
motion.
sorry, okay. So my motion, it's a friendly amendment to Councilman Tim's, which means we would do, instead of the total 1 million, we would do the asset inventory, the inclusion, collaboration with private entities, which inclusion and equity, and the technical advisor, which we need.
That's it.
Yeah, because right now, we're not ready for an RFP anyway, so.
So wait, so we're approving 900,000 instead of $1 million?
650,000.
Yeah.
What are you doing? You're doing,
We're doing
can you
650,000.
do it like that? Will
Yes.
that work for you?
Yes.
That's our motion. That's our friendly amendment.
Any other discussion? Roll call vote, please, Madam Clerk.
Should I start over?
Yeah.
Or, Councilmember Bertani, are you still remaining voting no?
I'm voting yes on the friendly amendment, which
Oh,
is
the friendly
currently on the
amendment, okay.
floor.
Okay,
That's called a compromise.
okay, just confirming. Okay, so she's yes, okay. I'm just gonna continue roll. Councilmember Moy, which I believe is absent. Councilmember Pandoro,
Yes.
Councilmember Tim,
Yes.
Councilmember Tonneson,
My yes is going to be a friendly yes.
Vice Mayor Vaccaro,
Yes.
and Mayor Price.
An enthusiastic yes. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Well,
Thank you.
ladies, thank you for a
Great
really
job
excellent
tonight.
presentation. This was Since we have no other business before this body, enjoy a very patriotic, safe 4th of July, and we'll see you at our next regular meeting on the 5th of July, please.
And
Thank you very much.
fireworks are 100% illegal in the city of Fairfield, no exceptions. Right, Chief? Thank you. All right.
Well, thank you very much. We are adjourned.